Dr. Misra, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Well, I'm Santrupt Misra. I was born on the eastern coast of India, but I've been in Mumbai for God knows last 35 years. Traveled to most part of the world, wherever participants are joining from. And I have two of my colleagues with me who are helping me, Ajay Soni, our Chief Learning Leadership Officer of the Aditya Birla Group. I work for the Aditya Birla Group. We are a $48 billion Indian conglomerate headquartered out of Mumbai, and we are in 17 different businesses. We call ourselves forest to fashion or textile to telecom, call whichever way. About 125,000 people in 40 countries with 30 nationalities and more. I've been with the company for 25 years. So that's about me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And who do we have with us on our panel?
Ajay, would you go, please?
Yeah, thanks, Nissa. Thanks, Dr. Misra. And a very good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Ajay Soni. I work with Dr. Misra in Aditya Birla Group, look after learning and leadership development. Excited to be here and talking to all of you. So Nessa, we will now carry on and yeah, Nessa?
You want to just say hi? Kanika, do you want to say hi? Are you there on the line?
Hi. Hi.
Say who you are, yeah.
Yeah. I'm Kanika and I'm part of the Leadership Learning Center of Aditya Birla Group, which is called Gyanodaya. And I'm happy to be part of this conference today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. Yes, I will let you take it away, Kanika. I have you available as co-host, and let me know when you're ready for sharing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anessa. And yeah, Kanika, you can put up the first slide. And I just wanted to introduce Dr. Misra a little more. Dr. Misra is CEO of Carbon Black, which is more than $1 billion business for us. He's also the director of chemicals, director also group human resources at Aditya Birla Group, which is almost a $50 billion global conglomerate. As Dr. Misra said, he has over 35 years of experience, and he's been on the board level of many different companies, both at Aditya Birla Group, outside Aditya Birla, as well as not-for-profit organizations. And he's a double PhD. He has a passion for education, and he's a double PhD gold medalist from human resources. He's done many different stints. Started off with this as a professor, and then since then he's broadened himself as a business leader and known industry stalwart, global industry stalwart. So it gives me immense amount of pleasure to be with him today. And thanks, Kocharya, for hosting this series and theme itself, Awake, Aware, Arise. It's indeed thought-provoking theme and makes one reflect on our own awakening and arising as the entire world goes through this massive transformation. I just thought I'll also take a minute to share overall flow of today's session. The theme of our session, Dr. Misra is going to talk about coaching in hyperactive age. As you can see, we are looking at this theme from lens of transformation. And therefore, Dr. Misra will be sharing the two aspects. One is exploring the nature of transformation. What does it mean? How does it happen? How is it experienced? And that's transformation itself. And then Dr. Misra will also talk about and share his thoughts about coaching as one of the methods of enabling transformation. After Dr. Misra has shared his views on these two aspects, I will then pose certain questions to Dr. Misra. And as I'm posing those questions, we will run certain polls in which you are also able to join us and share your views through those polls. And Dr. Misra will respond to those polls as well. Towards the end of the session, for about 20-25 minutes, I'll be asking him the questions that you are posing. So do start sharing your questions on the chat section of this Zoom meeting. What you can also do is, and you can start doing that right away, what you can also do is give a thumbs up to those questions that you really like. So if somebody is asked a question, you can give a thumbs up to that, and that will tell me that this question is popular and must ask that question to Dr. Misra. Before I hand over to him, at the beginning, Dr. Misra introduced himself, and I introduced him as a professional as well. But just wanted to add a little bit to that, to the softer side that Dr. Misra brings. And I've worked with him in various capacities for 20 years, so it's been a privilege. He is very well versed in Sanskrit shlokas, as well as poems, classical poems. And so don't be surprised if he breaks into one of those shlokas or poems today as well. Dr. Misra started his career as a teacher. He's a coach at heart, and people reach out to him for counseling, guidance, and he has time for everybody. He has time for a managing director of the group company, or if a child of an employee wants to reach out for guidance, he has time for that. Another aspect of the soft side to him, and I know I'm embarrassing Dr. Misra a little bit here, but if there are people in need, especially for education, and that's his focus on education, be it children of domestic workers or the lift boy in his building, he has compassion and support and his wisdom for everything. So with that, I will request Dr. Misra to share his views on transformation as well as coaching.
Thank you, Ajay. As always, you are being very kind. I was just getting worried that Ajay said everything about me. He might just disclose my income tax returns to Government of India as well in next moment. But thank God he didn't do that. Thank you, Ajay. You've been very kind. Kanika, thank you for helping me. Well, friends, I saw many friends from India on the list who have joined in. I hope to make many friends at the end of this presentation today. People I do not know from different parts of the world. I think it would be an understatement to say that we are living in a hyperactive age. Everything happens in a blink. Before you say Jack Robinson, the world has changed, technology has changed, lifestyle has changed, nature of work has changed. The way we negotiated, related globally between economies and countries has changed. And perhaps there is no aspect of our lives that remains untouched. And the question in this huge process of hyperaction that is happening around us and the kind of technological progress that is taking place, the question often comes is, how do we retain the relevance of human beings, the relevance of all that is human about this world and about all of us? How do we retain the significance and purpose of human connectedness? How do we still retain the world full of compassion, a world full of care, a world full of support, a world full of understanding, relationship, fellowship is always a challenge that is before us, simply because we seem to be all the time wondering what is the future is going to be like. And often I like to say that we are not going towards a future. I believe that the future is rushing towards us, whether we like it or not. And therefore, as the future rushes towards us and goes past us, perhaps we kind of catch slices and pieces of that future. And in process of doing that, we also ask, where do I fit into this future and how do I remain relevant? But when we talk about this hyperactive age, but we also find that one of the things that is constantly happening despite this hyperactive age is this whole issue called transformation. Things all around us are transforming, whether we like it or not, whether we notice it or not, whether we enjoy it or not, whether we are afraid about it or not, things are changing all around us. Like the way nature changes, and believing that different facets of change reveal themselves in different ways. And we find that the nature of this transformation in many ways is fundamental in terms of the way the qualities change, the skills we acquire, fundamentally where we began and where we landed up. Like, for example, Morgan Freeman, the actor here, who started as a theater actor and landed up in Hollywood, perhaps. Or the company like Nokia, 1865 or thereabouts, was created as a pulp and paper company, transformed into a great telephone handset company, went down and is trying to reinvent itself back, and I hope they do, because these are great institutions and inspirational institutions created that have been active examples of transformation. Or, for example, the usage of technology where reality virtually is being recreated for us, things that we do not see, we cannot see. The other day, I was seeing a technology that's being used by visually challenged people where something in a little device is with a camera is exactly sizing up an image and saying it, whispering into the eyes of a visually challenged person who's able to say, well, there is a glass tumbler in front of me or a paper glass in front of me, or it's a 3D object of certain kind. So technology is transforming the way we are experiencing things around us. But what is fascinating about transformation is that in today's world particularly, is that there are rapid multiple changes in different time horizons that are happening. Things that took us to see a transformation in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, today they are changing in 6 months, 3 weeks, 1 week, perhaps overnight. There are transformations, and some examples we'll put. And all of this, most importantly, is happening with human creativity, human ingenuity, human commitment to a larger sense of purpose to serve the community. We are talking about a race to discover or create or invent a vaccine for the coronavirus. And I think as and when it happens, and no matter who does it, and the fantastic point of that would be that we are able to react to a significant pandemic using that human creativity, where people are able to maintain their sanity, be it the front line, be it the researchers at the back end, and everybody, to make sure that here is a catastrophe that is confronting humanity and we are able to address that. The question is, in this whole process, as we think the enigmatic process there is, what is going on in human mind, in mind of leadership in different institutions, and how are they kind of being part of that? And there are some parts of this transformation, like nature, for example. Some of it we understand why it happens, how it happens, we are able to explain it. But there are lots of phenomena of nature we simply seem to enjoy, be it the picture here or the change in cherry blossoming in Japan that we see. Some of that we enjoy, but not all of it we can explain. We have been concerned about some of it, like glaciers. But again, we see that there are fundamentally elements like sodium, for example, or chlorine, for example, as you see on this slide here. They're harmful elements in themselves. But when they come together and they create salt, for example, becomes an essential ingredient of life. So even if you have elements that seem to be poisonous, negative, with human ingenuity, if it has been transformed, it creates life-saving, life-aiding, life-supporting elements, and sometimes life-transforming elements, and where the primary character is suppressed and a completely new quality is that is brought in. So I think all of this transformation that happens in our life, people are doing it, leaders are doing it, scientists are doing it, students are doing it, and there are many examples that going forward we will see also in the world of business, for example. We have heard all about what we see in our homes today when they have been locked down. Netflix has been the source of succor for many of us globally. And look at what has Netflix done. IBM for itself transformed itself from a box making company into a business solutions company. And the platform that we are doing today, engaging on today, called Zoom, this platform, some of the people who broke away from WebEx, those of you know the story of it, they came and created Zoom because they felt that perhaps WebEx could have transformed itself differently under the new ownership, and it was not happening fast enough. And we talked about Zoom today, including ours, 300 million daily Zoom meetings happening today on this platform. And we see that with combination of technology, understanding of human need, and leadership, we are meeting newer needs of humanity with some very, very significant innovations, changes all around us. And those stories are not necessarily only stories from United States or Europe, or for that matter from China. If I look at my own company that I work for, I've been so proud and honored to serve for the last 25 years, called the Aditya Birla Group as a global conglomerate. It has transformed itself. In my lifetime of being with this in 25 years, different 17, 16 sectors that we operate in, many of them we have leadership position. But if I may show you the story of transformation of this organization called Aditya Birla Group, it itself has been astounding, simply in terms of growth. 24 times growth in revenue in 25 years, 4.5x growth in operations, 2.5x increase in number of manufacturing units, 1.6x growth in number of employees. And obviously, there has been perhaps maybe about 20 times growth in EBITDA, if I may use that expression for those of you who are more accounting inclined, while bringing down the average age. And therefore, here is a business institution that we have been able to transform with collective work of leadership. And I will talk about it a little bit more if time permits, as to coaching certainly has played a very substantive role in creating the necessary mindset, the skill set, the reflective capability, the connective capability of the leadership to transform this organization. It is not just nature, it is not just businesses, but I think there are many inspiring stories of human transformation that inspires us in the world. Gautam Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, or the ultimate inspiration of Buddhism, the creator of it, his own story of meditation, leaving his family, sitting under a banyan tree for 49 days and developing a different point of view about human suffering, about human life, about human salvation. Some call it nirvana, some call it freedom from bondage. But that's a very inspiring story of Lord Gautam Buddha. Many of you, those of you who are from India, would equally know of the story of Maharishi Valmiki, who wrote the Indian epic called Ramayana, who happened to be, as mythology says, an ordinary robber who tied somebody, another kind of supposed to be a decent soul and disciple of a Hindu deity. And he tied up this robber, and when he tied him up, and this gentleman who was attacked said, look, all the sins you are committing, are your family going to share those sins, because you seem to be doing this for your family? And this robber went back to the family and asked, would you share my sins? Nobody agreed. Now the robber came back and wanted a path to salvation. And I do not know exactly whether the gentleman who was tied up, called Narada, was he himself a coach or not, but he did say something that did touch a chord, and this robber got transformed into one of the epic poets who wrote this Indian mythology. You also today, in more recent years, if you come to think about it, we don't have to go to mythology necessarily. Many of you have read about personalities in not so distant past, like Chuck Feeney here, the billionaire who wanted to be officially in his lifetime be broke and perhaps renounce this world as broke, somewhat like, in some ways, looked at the modern Gautam Buddha, who kind of relinquished all the royal pleasures he had. And that was the story of Gautam Buddha. Many of you may know, belonged to a royal family who left his the pleasures of royal life and became a common ascetic. Similarly, this is a gentleman who changed in his lifetime his point of view about life and decided to donate all the wealth he acquired in his own lifetime to feel that everything that he created had a greater social purpose and trusteeship. So the point I'm trying to make is that even in this hyperactive age, acts of creation, acts of innovation, acts of reflection, acts of giving and caring, re-engineering a certain degree of inner transformation to ask larger question of what's the purpose of life? Am I being beneficial to all concerned? Are there experiences that are triggering in me different emotions and making me more aware about my own impact on society, impact around people, teams, my colleagues, the organization I lead or the people I lead, and can I make a bigger difference? I think all of these emotions are going through, and coaching sometimes direct, indirect, unconscious support and inspiration from other people, all are kind of contributing to this process of transformation. Moving forward from there, if I were to say that the examples of transformation not simply have happened in human beings, but through human beings, even at world at large, whether you look at a city like Las Vegas in US, notwithstanding value judgments, if we keep aside, simply the concept and idea of it. Dubai, the concept and idea of it as a global city. Singapore, as an idea of a global example of transformative modernization with a combination of technology and values, technology and legacy, technology and tradition, technology and yet preservation of pieces of historical culture. All of this have been possible because of human belief, reflections about many aspects of what's something one wants to create and be able to create. So I think all around us, when we look at that, transformation is a basic nature of human beings that needs to be or is waiting to be unleashed once there is a trigger that either happens from within or happens from outside with a little bit of help, and call that help coaching, call that help role modeling, call that help a kind of gentle nudge or a suggestion. I think it is happening all around us. Can you move, Kanika, further, please? So therefore, as professionals who have spent all our lifetime serving a function or a profession or an organization, I think it is in our nature in some ways. It is the way we have been nurtured, that there is an inherent desire and ability in us to be a catalyst of transformation. And perhaps coaching is one means through which we can transform. But there are questions that are germane to coaching as a technology, as a tool, as a profession, as a means, as a method, as an intervention. That is getting challenged in the hyperactive age, and that's what we need to remain conscious about. We have seen this film called Intern, where somebody goes to get perhaps coached by somebody much younger, but in turn has something else to also return and gift. And I think in the hyperactive age, one of the things that has changed perhaps is that the nature of this coaching relationship has fundamentally undergone a change. And this is where I want to introduce a thought, which I again will turn perhaps towards the end of my presentation, is to say that given the complex needs of the hyperactive society and the range of emotions, the range of challenges, the range of issues that one is dealing with, can an individual alone be the source of coaching for transformation for another leader? If I may draw an analogy from the legal function, if you look at a legal firm, there is a partner on civil matters, there's a partner on taxation matters, there's a partner on M&A or partner on IP. A legal firm consists of many people who have preeminent expertise in different facets of legal profession. I believe today the leadership challenges are multifarious, and whether instead of individual coaching, there is a need to move to a model of partnered coaching where different coaches bring different facets of ability. So maybe there is an initial coach perhaps goes and engages with the coachee or participant or whatever you call the other person, and understands the needs and draws out and then refers to a set of different coaches who could bring in different unique value to the individual. And maybe coaching, therefore, perhaps in the hyperactive age needs to ask itself, what kind of transformation coaching needs to undergo itself. Should individual coaching alone be adequate, or for what purpose could it be adequate? And therefore, should a client or a coachee be approached through a partnership of coaches who are always available? And there could be a situation of a lead coach and partner coaches, where the lead coach does the relationship, does the assessment, but draws in a range of expertise to help this individual to cope with. Because in the hyperactive age, what is of essence is time, perhaps, the speed of doing things. And relying on one individual's expertise to be able to meet all the needs and waiting for a long drawn out process, perhaps many leaders in this hyperactive world do not have the time for, because they're internally challenged and troubled about how to deal with a range of changes happening in the regulatory system. There's health scare, client expectations, new technology transforming their businesses. So that is one of the things. So while coaching for transformation is essential, transforming coaching is equally essential, and that is something we need to think about. And maybe in my closing slides, perhaps let me think I've spoken long enough. Maybe I should stop here with that thought, but can you, Kanika, go to the last 2 or 3 slides, please? And I think I'll skip some of that. Last 2 or 3, maybe, or exactly. I think if we could stay there. One of the things I want to talk about is that historically, earlier, we equated capacity to coach someone with age, as if vintage experience like maturing wine is always important, that unless I'm 50 plus or 60 plus, I've got a full professional life, then only I transit into coaching and as if I have something to offer. But I think we need to now think of coaching perhaps in a more pyramidal manner, that perhaps somebody who's in 35 age bracket could coach somebody who's 22, 25 or an early career professional. I think we need to create a culture of coaching over a period of time, and therefore we need to move away, from this age and experience intensive coaching to more relatable generational coaching. And second part we need to think about is how is perhaps artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., the algorithmic programming, can it distill human issues into very classifiable issues around machine, and is it likely that coaching and a lot of the base problems that are kind of standardized or commoditized human problems, if I may call them, could perhaps be codified into artificial intelligence, and could therefore a machine-based coaching is likely to be the future? And how is it likely therefore that human coaches, people like us who are on the platform, need to bring in very different kind of value into that coaching relationship? So how do we differentiate between where would machine coaching end and where would human coaching would begin? And can perhaps some of the more, because one of the things of individual coaching and coaching engagement for many corporations perhaps is that it is not very affordable, both in terms of time and money. And could there be a usage of technology in there? Move on, please, to the last slide, Kanika, on the subject. One of the issues, last one I want to talk about, is the internal preparedness, perhaps. And this one, the internal preparedness, one of the issues is that can you prepare the internal climate of the organization to accept coaching? And if there is an equivalent of, like we talk about in the dating world, people talk about speed dating. Could there be an equivalent of that as speed coaching that is possible, which crunches time? And of course, I would like to close it with this famous statement that perhaps Benjamin Franklin made. I have not checked the veracity of the coach, the quotation, because there are now platforms available. Kanika, if you can go to the very last slide, please. There are platforms available that check out whether what you talk about is true or not. He seemed to have said, when you have finished changing, you are finished. And I think, therefore, transformation has to be a continuous process. And I think we need to transform coaching itself, aided by technology, unaided by technology, circumscribed by changing context, and asking ourselves whether as coaches, as individual coaches, because already I know colleagues who are from the Western world may not relate to cricket as an analogy. Today already we find that in cricket world, we have batting coaches, we have fielding coaches, we have bowling coaches. So there are elements of specialization in coaching emerging. And and the analogy I gave you of a legal firm, is there a time that comes today about we need to kind of create different streams of coaching and think in terms of a partnership approach to coaching a leader to really meet their needs, rather than believe that one coach can be the source of all kinds of reflective thinking and aid for someone who seeks that guidance and support. So thank you again for having me. I think I'll have a conversation with Ajay now. He has some questions perhaps, and then happy to take any questions you may have. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dr. Misra. Very interesting. You talked about coaching for transformation and transforming coaching itself. Very interesting. And there were lots of comments coming on the comment section, and I was reading there. And Arvind has said that, great to hear about accelerating the coaching process to match the need of hyper age. And he's saying some experiences on speed coaching, if you could throw light on. One of the things that is coming to my mind is really exec BC that we are running, and that's a 4-month kind of exercise. You may want to talk about some of these speed coaching aspects from the mission.
Arvind, if I may say, we already have moved from, let's say, 3-month programs, 2 weeks executive education, to 1 week, to now we are talking about bite-sized learning. Now, could we therefore come down to, instead of a 9-month coaching engagement, could we kind of come up with 3-day, 1-week coaching engagements where we address one slice of the issue, which is the primary issue, and leave with certain ideas with the coachee who can go on their own and experiment with it, and come back at their choice to whether there has been a value addition and they would like to explore more. So I think flexibility is a part of the hyperactive age, where everything is given in a choice form, in a flexible form, and it's sometimes mass customized, it is individually customized. Often in our coaching methodology in the past, we have done individual customization, but that customization still has been on a larger frame of a certain number of months or certain number of engagements. Perhaps the shampoo sachet or many other kind of flexible consumer-centric arrangements that are there, perhaps even in human development, we will need to bring that. And we already seeing that how education getting transformed through unique institutions on online platforms. And this whole virtual mode of coaching, the question to again ask Arvind there is that, if virtual is the future, how is the coach's own skills need to transform to fit into the virtual world? Now, as simply transforming a bunch of slides from a physical situation to a virtual classroom does not suffice. Similarly, perhaps simply having a screen-based conversation, just because I have been a coach in a more face-to-face format, would not work. So I think we need to create a lot of experiments with acceleration and speed coaching, for example, where I think a lot of control of the pace of that learning, choice of the issue, need to shift to the coachee. And they need to be given compressed formats and options to choose from. Like we go to restaurant, you get an a la carte menu. You get a 3-course set menu, 5-course set menu, 7-course set menu. I think coaching needs to move to a menu-based approach where the coachee would have a choice and control to make choices, informed choices as to what method they will take. Now, Which one of those will work in what cultural context and organizational context, I cannot say that. But what I would urge all of us that we need to experiment far more with the technology of coaching by being more client-centric and by creating more choices and options rather than leaving very few choices and options with the coachee as to how they want to engage, what period of time, how many sessions, and all of that. And we as coaches perhaps need to be more comfortable with that idea to be able to do that. Thank you for the question.
Fantastic. I would request everybody to put the questions on the Q&A side, because otherwise I have to toggle both the comments chat section and Q&A section. For the time being, I'm doing that. But going forward, if you can just type in on the Q&A side. So another linked question, Dr. Misra. What kind of transformation, this is Shrubbery, what kind of transformation do you believe can be hastened, and what kind of transformation cannot be supported through bite-sized, virtually supported, etc.?
You know, I think I used to ask, thank you for the question. I used to ask similar question of myself, what can be accelerated, what kind of transformation? But I believe today perhaps all forms of transformation can be accelerated provided we know how to do it and how experimental we are in our approach. I think certain stimulus, if I may give you an example, if today in India, illiterate women in rural India transform to digital mode of payment in no time because there was no physical contact, no exchange of currency, and it became necessary to use technology to make payments. Even if illiterate men and women in rural India could transform into digital mode of payment. If, for example, people who are digital immigrants, people in older age bracket could suddenly transform into adopting Zoom or MS technology or any other technology for that matter, as soon as the Corona pandemic came, it has shattered a lot of our notions of transformation, that every transformation takes time. There's the speed of learning. I think the urgency of the necessity creates the pressure for transformation today. And everybody has started doing that. Things that one thought was impossible, one could not do it. Buying behavior of consumers has changed. So I believe the hyperactive age and the things changing around us, we need to kind of question our belief system that certain transformation necessarily take long time. I believe maybe we got to tell ourselves that perhaps every transformation process can be compressed provided we know how to do it. And maybe in our current state of knowledge, we all are not aware of and don't know it. We all need to experiment, and platforms like this need to pool the knowledge and experiences of everybody to figure out or find out how exactly can it be done. So I'm afraid I do not have a ready-made answer to you, but I believe that every experimentation by us will take us closer, and everything that was thought impossible earlier, flying cars, going to Mars or any other space travel, having supersonic travel, non-stop flights from Sydney to San Francisco, I don't know. Many of those things were unthinkable in the past, are all being possible today. Transformation of human life in many respects. So I believe that in human development, which is the coaching profession is all about, we need to question a lot of the legacy assumptions, if I may call it, that we have made, and experiment more to figure out in our own technology, what are the limits of possibility that are there. Human capacity to develop is immense, only if we know how to trigger it, you know. I suspect that a time will come on Cocharia platform, we will be talking about experiences of that kind as we take on more chances and delve into that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Misra. And just a supplementary question here, and a question or a comment, and maybe you can respond to that. Rajan Sinha has said menu-based coaching is interesting, but won't expectation of benefit from speed coaching be like speed birth?
No, sorry, last part I couldn't.
Extending that. But won't expectation of benefit from speed coaching be like speed birth, premature baby kind of would be a possible outcome?
No, you know, the issue is that if we all believe in the potential of coaching, which I believe and I suspect all of you believe, that then the coaching has to be relevant to the constituents it's supposed to address. And if shortage of time, making recalibration of personal style or orientation at a fast pace is the expectation, if the tolerance of investors out of a CEO is for a limited period of time, all of us know CEO lifespan is reducing, corporate lifespan is reducing. If people's expectation is that by the age of 40, 45, they would like to do certain things and accomplish and transform the trajectory of their life after that. So because there are a lot of those expectational issues and thresholds of tolerance, patience, all are dropping, I think it would simply be wise to believe that the value through speed will be created is to continue to remain relevant to the changing needs of those individuals. Because a lot of the things we developed in coaching, including the belief system around coaching, were developed in a very steady state world where things did take time to change. Things had a predictable rhythm when they changed. In so many years, this will happen, such period of time it will happen, where you could anticipate a change which is at the horizon and it will slowly unfold itself out of the mist and come gradually towards you. You could slowly recalibrate. But the demand and need to recalibrate faster is so high on professionals, individuals, medical professionals, for example, that the entire profession with technology is going to get completely transformed. It is only the finest of the things that technology cannot do that a medical professional will be called on to do. 99% of the things perhaps conventionally known as medicine would be taken over, including already today you are seeing on telemedicine, or you will have artificial intelligence. If you put your symptoms clearly, it can predictively, today can accurately tell you that 99% chances you have a COVID infection, even before you test it. Now, so the point is the reaction time necessary today to any event happening around, the agility that we talk about, is getting shorter. So I believe the benefit of it is to keep coaching relevant for people because the time expectations are getting shorter. Thank you, Rajan. Ajay, I'm losing you.
Dr. Misra. I will, Kanika, I'll ask another question. After that, we'll
Ajay, we are losing you.
Dr. Misra. Hi, Nisa, you can hear?
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Better now.
Ajay, you may want to go off the video and use your audio if your bandwidth is causing you a problem.
Yeah, I've done that. So what we will do, Kanika, it's better now?
Yeah.
It is.
Great, thank you. So what we'll do after this question, I'll ask another question to Dr. Misra, and then we will do our first poll. So Dr. Misra, you joined Aditya Birla Group 20 years back. The group was $1.5 billion or thereabouts.
25 years ago, Ajay. Correction, 25 years ago. Silver Jubilee.
$50 billion. 25 years. Correct. 25. And today, group is $50 billion. What are three significant ingredients that went into this transformation of the group?
I think, first of all, recognition by the leadership that the world out there, the business environment in India and globally, was going to change and was changing fast enough that we needed to transform ourselves. So it's first of all leadership's recognition of that. Number two, leadership's willingness to shed what they had learned in the past and learn new things. That's the second one. And third and most important is their willingness to absorb new talent and new mindsets, or bring in deliberately new mindsets into the organization that would know the way into the future and show the way, having traversed the paths that they had not traversed before. So I would say these three things made a big difference to this transformation.
Okay, very nice. Kanika, would you like to share the first poll question and how can the participants participate in the poll?
Sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes, right.
Yeah. So our first poll question is, as you can see it on the screen, as we now move into a new decade, businesses will need to transform. So what changes leaders will need to make in this new decade? You can go to www.menti.com and enter the code as mentioned on the screen. It's 77322262. You can alternatively also scan this QR code using your phone.
Now you are throwing everyone a new challenge to adopt a new technology very quickly. And how do you be kind of savvy enough to move between different sites and technology? Wow.
Yeah, you can use your laptop if you are on laptop, or you can use your handphone. Go to menti.com. Code is 77322262. It's also in the chat. Nessa has put that on the chat.
If I understand, perhaps on Zoom, there is a facility, Ajay, that you don't have to go anywhere. You can do the poll on it.
Yes, that's correct. We can create polls within the webinar.
Yes, I know.
Well, we do have a number of questions here. I just wanted to quickly look.
Yeah, please go on.
So let me see here. Himanshu had a question. Can it be a mix of coaching and expert mentoring to provide guidance and specific solutions to make the whole process a combination of self-exploration and hand-holding? Interesting.
I think that's a very interesting proposition. I must agree that as the world of the future gets more and more specialized, perhaps we would need the combination of both, because sometimes it will be very difficult to relate to the world of the coachee, particularly if he or she belongs to a very unique area of specialization, because there would be issues one would be struggling with, which are not just about personal development, but it's a personal development in the context of the world that I operate in. So in fact, I think you are very right. I think it could be a good combination to do that. I think many of the coaches need to experiment with that. And, you know, it's like, again, in medicine, you have a general medical practitioner who sees you, but draws on a specialist to come and address a particular issue, which is a subject area expertise to help you. The way the partnership happens between an anesthetist and a surgeon, you know, in medical science. So I think perhaps it would be worth experimenting with a certain kind of professions where you could do a combination of expert mentoring and coaching. Thank you for that thought. It's a very interesting idea.
Wonderful. Did you want to continue? Did you want to continue the questions, Doctor?
Yeah, you can continue another question. No worries. As it comes on in the poll, please go on. What's the next question?
Not a problem. Let me see here. So one way to accelerate transformation will be perhaps to work with a transformation team rather than an individual. Any comments on this possibility?
Well, actually, you know, whether it's a team coaching or individual coaching, I'm encouragingly believing that we need to experiment with a team of coaches, because I talked about the analogy of a legal firm. I think there could be a lead coach who does the assessment, etc., and that draws on a range of coaches to, you know, help that individual or that team, because there could be unique aspects of issues to be addressed that one may not be individually able to do so. So I would certainly encourage experimentation of that kind. So coaching partnership, I kind of believe that coaching partnership would be a model that would evolve in future. That it will be a supermarket of coaching that a group of 5, 7, 12 people bring in, you know. So it's not in one individual coach necessarily.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me see here. Dr. Misra, what would be the top 3 issues you see that would call for coaching at the leadership level?
Sorry, what issue you said? The first one?
It says, what would be the top 3 issues you see that we would call for coaching at the leadership level?
I don't know honestly exactly what you mean by type 3 issues. But I believe that any role at the top is getting increasingly lonely and expectations are getting more complex. And complexity of expectation along with loneliness can be a very dangerous combination, you know. And it can be even more dangerous if the individual is not self-aware. As all of us know in coaching that only 10 to 15% people are self-aware. Most others are not. So when expectations are high, world is changing very fast. And I think you are lonely at the top and your self-awareness is too low. I think that's a situation where perhaps coaching would be extremely important. Now, whether the individual himself or herself would make that choice or need to be nudged into making that choice, whether by human resources or a friend or a spouse or a significant other or even a board collectively as a body, I do not know. I think there would be occasions, you know, I remember an example, you know, recently there was a severe stress in a particular sector in India. I don't wish to name it just not to help it identify. And when the sector was under stress, one of my colleague CEOs came into my room and I could sense it that there was a degree of anxiety and a degree of whatever. And I told him, look, why don't you create your personal board of advisors, 3 of them that you have trust on, who understand the sector, and just simply have free-flowing conversations with them. Now, whether you call it coaching, mentoring, let's get not stuck with semantics, but the point is that the need at the top increasingly requires that a voice different from yours in the comfort of confidentiality, you need to be able to kind of exchange with, and that will be very useful and important. Thank you so much. Ajay, maybe you would like to forsake the polls, given that it would technologically, is it helping making people switch and maybe continue with the conversation?
Sounds good, Dr. Misra.
Yeah.
So, and interestingly, in this poll, what comes is that what is required in coming decade is humility, flexibility, listening, adaptability. Any responses to that?
No, I think they are all right. You know, the word humility that is coming across is again to ask the question is, what is humility and what is the source of humility? I believe the source of humility is definitely a deep-seated awareness that one is a small speck in the world, one cannot control the world, one knows very little about the world that one lives in, and that realization that how little an impact one can in normal course make, and how vast the world is and the mysteries and ways of the world and how much there is to learn and how fast things are changing, all of that kind of leads you to a degree of reflection with yourself about, do you really know the world? Are you on top of your profession? Do you really understand what you're dealing with? And the more and more you ask such questions of yourself and understand and accept the limitations of yours, and also identify some sources of inspiration and energy that you have, I think that builds that realistic perspective about you, and that makes you more humble, that what's the purpose of your life and how can you make a difference? Are you making a difference to others? How narrow is your vision? So, you know, a lot of the thing repurposing our own life, repurposing our own skills, repurposing our own mindset. All of this become important part of it, and in different words, people are saying that in answer to your question.
Very interesting. Repurposing life and mindsets, making a difference, finding your meaning, all very relevant. So, Dr. Misra, about this question was about the future transformation, what leaders will need to do. And I will come to your own transformation. As ABG has transformed, you have transformed yourself from being a professor to being an HR professional to being group head of HR to leading one business to leading multiple business and functions. So what have been key pillars of your personal transformation?
Well, I don't know what you mean by key pillars. I think my multiple exposure to life situations, coming from, state like Odisha, where not having an English language education, and to come and compete with people in Delhi as I was going to JNU, or coming to compete with my colleagues in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, having nobody in the family in the world of industry to break into the world of industry in Mumbai, going to do a second PhD in England much before globalization became fashionable. I think I have been just fortunate to have a ever expanding canvas and exposure in life that not only taught me many things, but also helped me to ask right questions about myself and think about many things. And also, along with that, taking certain risks at a certain point in time in professional life. And risk-taking can be a great way of self-exploration. I don't know in coaching process whether we encourage enough people to take risks with themselves, because I find in my personal transformation that a lot of those shifts that you talked about, Ajay, each one of them was fraught with risk at that point in time. I could have failed and not related or lost out in terms of delivering what was expected of me, or me being personally able to adapt to the new environment, from an MNC to a large Indian company, an Indian company to globalizing, and from HR to business, within business to hardcore chemical industries that I lead now, not being a chemical engineer. So each process could have been a failure. But the point is that risks often make you more aware about your limitations, and you become more humble because you realize, because if I always stayed in HR, even though in HR there is so much to learn and know, but you cannot but help, if you are honest, that's a human weakness, that you cannot but feel that you know your subject, and that would have been limiting itself. It is only when you go out of your comfort zone and the larger the risk you take, you explore more about yourself. I think perhaps that risk-taking with my own career, not going to MNC, going to an Indian company, from Indian company going into teaching, from teaching to coming into a hardcore successful multinational, moving to that time at Aditya Birla Group, which was a more family-led at that time, and not such a huge brand as it is today, and had very limited globalization. I think each point represented a degree of risk, and I think risk can be a great teacher. And I think we in coaching framework, whether we use risk stimulus as an intervention, I do not know how often we use, how much we use. I think we need to perhaps use it little more, how should I say, purposefully, to create more transformation. Ajay, I'm kind of acutely aware that we are reaching about 8:30. Just make sure that we're respecting the time for everyone in the session.
Sure. So why don't we take a couple of more audience questions, and then I will do a rapid fire, if you're okay with that.
Well, but just check with Nessa how much time we have, because you don't want to overshoot compared to what they're promised platform members. Yeah.
Yes. So we're doing good. We have 30 minutes available to us before we close out the session.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. I was somewhat under the impression it was a 60-minute session. All right. Go on, Ajay, please. Then you got plenty of time.
Okay, wonderful.
Until everybody falls off to sleep on the platform. Yeah.
Harish Devarajan, he has two questions. Let me ask both. In your opinion, is experience or age of coach a key criteria for success as a coach? And number two, how about young coaches for senior experienced executives?
Well, Haris, first of all, as a good friend, you're not supposed to kind of, how should I say, rag me on this public platform by asking two questions, but oh, good to hear from you. Hope you're doing well. First is, I don't think I have ever believed, in my own life, I've kind of reached responsibilities at a very young age, so I have never been a believer of age. I think it's the quality of experience that you are able to bring. And I believe that irrespective of your age, every individual is able to add value to somebody. And I think it is just being able to identify the right person who would benefit from it. Sometimes in my interaction with my children, sometimes they make statements to me, which is far maturer than their age, I find. And therefore, I suddenly tell myself, well, that's a great insight. It's not about age then. So therefore, I've never been a believer that age is what is material. Like for example, younger people can teach you a lot of things on adapting to a more technology savvy age and how do you think about issues. I think what younger people is kind of help you kind of think through more about your life script and the way you act and react to things, the way you see things, for example, how should I put it? Let's say the age bracket that we come from, Haris, that enduring pain, going through phase of suffering, walking that extra mile to save a few penny was part of our DNA, and that's how we think. But a younger person, for example, thinks of convenience. Now, convenience is never a factor or a mindset of, let's say, a certain generation, and I put myself in that generation. But the younger people are all about convenience. Now, if I were to explore this whole idea of convenience in my mind and think of myself that how could I make my life better, free up my time for more meaningful work by being more convenience oriented, I believe someone much younger than me could be a great coach for me to relate to this whole concept of convenience. So I think there are very unique concepts that are born with different time and age bracket, evolution of civilization or technology, that a person of previous generation misses out on. And I think that generational gap that often we have been aware about, instead of being concerned about it, I think we need to leverage that as an opportunity. And I believe increasingly, particularly in India, as the young people population is so significant, has grown, I think all of those who are born earlier perhaps could benefit a lot more by leveraging the younger population as an opportunity to familiarize themselves and leverage and use newer concepts. Convenience is an example only I'm using, but there are many, many newer concepts, for example. Texting, for example, the habit of texting. Again, you've got to figure it out. How does that work? What's the mindset behind it? And I think that will build more meaningful relationships if we are able to kind of, I don't know, it was an interesting experiment we did in our learning center many, many years ago, where we called some college kids, 18, 19, I don't remember exact age bracket. And we had a bunch of senior managers who were at lunch and different table, and we put one young person from college. And we said, you just have to have a conversation with this person over lunch. Half the senior people did not know what conversation to have. And sometimes some people just came away and said, what conversation am I supposed to have? We said, anything. Now that anything was something very uncomfortable because, and today perhaps it's even more glaring because the young person has so much to share, life view, world view, his understanding of everything. So I think young, one, age is not a criteria. And B, I think younger people can be also great coaches depending on for who and at what purpose we're going to use it. Stay safe, Harish. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Dr. Misra. Two questions, and I'll combine them. One from Suresh Anugulo. I hope I've pronounced the name right. And another one from Ramakrishna Rao. What does Aditya Birla Group stand on coachability? Do you have assessment on coachability while starting the coaching process? And second, do you see full-time coaches within organization as a possibility?
Well, the second question is easier to answer. I don't think we are looking at full-time coaches in the organization. Rather, our effort is to create coaching capability in as many managers as possible and have some of them are more certified, trained coaches. And we run an internal program to certify coaches, which extends over a longer period of time so that they kind of bring in true ability to coach our people. And of course, the effort is to make sure that every significant conversation, including appraisal conversation, etc., have an overlay of coaching in some manner so that we try to make this an integral part of our managers' abilities or repertoire, so to speak. So the second one is easier to answer, that we know we are not going to have full-time coaches. Now, coachability quotient, do we assess that before doing that? Actually, we don't do that. We have over a period of time kind of developed, without using artificial intelligence, actually an analytics in our own mind as to what kind of people that we notice within the organization where coaching does not work very easily or unlikely to work. And we have a reason to figure out why it is unlikely to work under the current circumstances or at this point in the person's career. We rely very heavily on the judgment of the line manager or the immediate manager and a conversation between the manager and HR colleagues of mine to figure out whether coaching is likely to succeed. We have been very careful to kind of do coaching at certain critical moments of individuals' career in the organization, at critical moments of career transition. For example, if somebody is moving from a functional role to a more line role, or to a more from a cost center to a P&L role, or from a small business to a much larger business, or for example, transiting from one geography to a completely different geography in terms of a different country, where cultural nuances could be different, moving from a very market-driven industry to a highly regulated industry. So I think there are some critical career transitions we have identified where perhaps we use coaching much more as an external intervention. The other places where we believe that there are high potential executives who can scale and contribute to the organization more, I think for some of them we also use at early stages of their career internal coaches. So it is a more refined sense of judgment that we use. We do not do a formal coachability assessment, but particularly at upper, middle to senior managers, we do have a sense over the years that does this individual show certain traits that coaching is likely to be of limited impact.
Follow-up question on Aditya Birla Group, Krishna Swami Aladi. He's saying, Dr. Misra, how many of these processes have you been able to initiate in your organization?
Depends on what you mean by how many of these processes. Most of that I talked about have all been there in the group, and they have been there for, I don't know, at least for 2 decades in different forms, with always improvisation, reform, change. One of the good things about the Aditya Birla Group is we have always been highly critical about and questioning about what we have done ourselves, and have been willing to always transform ourselves into the next round, saying what could we do differently about this and how do we do that. Obviously, there is no one best way of doing it. And I think if you can consistently keep on doing the same thing over a long period of time, we are likely to get diminishing returns. And therefore, we are always perfectly willing to shed something that we have done or the way we have done and to adopt new ways of doing things and experiment with newer things. I think experimentation is possibly the core to renewal now, that every profession, every organization must run pilots and experiments with a certain hypothesis or a point of view, what works or doesn't work. For example, in what kind of situation perhaps HR managers would be better coaches than line managers. Maybe I would do experiment on that. So I think we often debate about ideas, and like typically the innovation funnel or the research product development funnel of stage gate that you talk about, we often go through a mental stage gate process from ideation to commercialization. And we talk about which of those ideas pass through the filter, and we need to now more actively experiment and then scale up if we feel that that experiment is working well for us. And I think on human resources space, we have done lots of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Misra. Truly, my own experience last 6 years, there's a lot of development culture, coaching culture in our organization. A question by Shabari Madabba, and she says, a question if you should agree to respond to Dr. Misra. What is a challenging transformation that you are experiencing personally in today's context?
Well, I think the biggest challenging thing that I'm trying to struggle with is I run a business or two businesses that have about 38 plants spanning over 16 countries. How do I keep on keeping the connectivity of my colleagues with the business, with the leadership, with the Aditya Birla Group, and me personally going, despite not being able to travel? Like, for example, it sounds like a great, exciting, romantic phenomenon to have onboarded, let's say, a new plant manager in Brazil through the pandemic. Okay, story ended there. But that plant manager that has been onboarded in Brazil has never had a person connect with me, nor I have had maybe one interview call and subsequently one introductory call in virtual mode. But to be able to get a sense of who that individual is, how well is he doing, etc., which earlier through frequent visits, meetings, face-to-face meetings, I had a greater sense of pulse of the individual, the context, the thought processes. And I think the biggest transformation I'm going through is how to overcome my inner anxiety that I have been able to cope with this whole dispersed business of mine through one model of interaction, particularly with newer people. And whether with the switch to a new model of interaction, I would be able to establish same degree of trust, same degree of legitimacy, same degree of human connect with different parts of the organization, still operating through virtual mode, remaining distant and perhaps confined in Mumbai. And that's one biggest transformation I'm going through my mind, my skills, and experimenting in different ways to figure out how best can I do that.
Yeah. Interesting, Dr. Misra, you talk about anxiety. Makes all of us feel that it's okay to be anxious. There was a question Arvind had asked, or rather there was a question that was there in the comment section. It was an interesting question. I think I'll ask that. I don't remember the name, but where have you seen coaching fail?
Well, I think mostly I have seen coaching fail in situations where a person has grown over a long period of time with a dose of appreciation and appreciation alone, and has been lucky enough that the context and environment has helped that individual to be hugely successful. And I think when this twin factor of context having helped you to be successful, and not necessarily you alone or large part of you, but the context has played a large part of your success or the legacy attributed to you, and where you had managers or leaders who believed in, or for whatever reason, they simply praised you and pandered to you and your need for affirmation and ego without ever challenging or presenting alternative models or modes of looking at the world or development. I think those two combinations when have been there in people's lives, I have found that coaching, whether failed or not, was a very painful process.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Misra, for sharing that. There are lots of other questions, but in some ways, a lot of answers you've already provided, and some great thought, food for thought is already there, though I'm sure everybody is waiting for food, and yours must have been an exhausting day. I know you start very early in the morning. So let me pose some rapid fire questions, Dr. Misra.
Sure.
What is your instinctive preference? A leader who's too soft versus a leader who's too hard?
My
Who would you
preference?
go for? Yeah, who would you go for? You have only two leaders. You have to choose between them. A leader who's too soft, a leader who's too hard.
Well, if I have a third option, I would say a leader who is hard outside but soft inside.
Okay. Let's say MD of one of your business, would you rather have, for one of the MDs of your businesses, would you rather have a coach who's been an HR professional in the past life, or the one who's been a CEO?
It depends on who I am and what I want to be, and I think it depends on what stage of journey I'm in. If I am an HR guy and I want to transit into a line role, maybe I would like a CEO or somebody who has a CEO experience as my coach. But if I am maybe I'm a kind of line guy, I want to move to a staff function as a part of career development, maybe I may want an HR guy to be my coach. So, it depends on my own career stage and what I want to do next. And why am I going for coaching,
Right. It's about the context. Okay. For another leader, would you rather have a coach who's earlier worked in the same industry, or a coach who's worked in that industry?
I would always prefer a different perspective, because as I told or I mentioned in one of my answers earlier, that is the different perspectives that I got exposed to that helped my own evolution, both as a person and as a professional. So I believe that alternate, diverse, contrarian perspectives are very useful, rather than reaffirmation of certain belief system that could always occur when the coach also is from the background of the same industry.
Right. Thank you for that. My fourth question is, in near future, do you see AI replace humans in coaching? Yes or no?
Well, it depends on what you mean by near future. I would not be surprised at all if in next 5 years' time, or even for all you know, in some corner of the world, somebody is devising standardized human problems, taking 200 coaches research saying what are the common problems you have identified as a coaching or coachable issues that you have identified most frequently, and converting that into a kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithm to suggest a range of options, etc. So, I think pretty much everything is getting technology based. So I would not be surprised that some part of coaching is also going to get there. Now, how fast? That's a tough question for anybody to answer today. For all you know, 6 months down the line, you may find a product in the market.
Right. Last rapid fire question is, if for a group of 5 high potentials, would you rather have group coaching or individual coaching?
I think we need to experiment more with group coaching, team coaching. I think we have stayed far too long with individual coaching. I think we have created, overemphasized the privacy, the issue of confidentiality. I think we are moving into a society that is more transparent. We are all, maybe in, so to speak, emperors without clothes. We are living in glass houses. So I think the coaching process needs to adopt perhaps more transparency and taking leverage or opportunity of the current crop of leadership, more younger leadership, being more comfortable about talking about themselves and talking about their own issues and anxieties, and believing and benefiting from a more transparent and open society. I think perhaps coaching also needs to kind of overcome some of those paradigms that we have created about around privacy and confidentiality. I'm not saying that we go to brazenly throw those out of the window, but I think we need to acknowledge the fact that the society is getting more open and more accepting and more willing. We used to, in our older days, we used to talk about circles called Alcoholic Anonymous. You may in future have, friendship circles of alcoholics who want to be de-addicted. Maybe you want to go as group and maybe go through that therapy to help de-addiction. It's not anonymous. It's not important that you didn't know each other. It remained confined. I think if you look at depression as a phenomenon, as a mental health issue, I think the willingness to talk about mental health, depression, or issues of that kind today in society is far greater, that openness, than it was 10 years, 20 years ago, at least in India, and perhaps in many parts of the world. I think perhaps in Western world, perhaps talking to a shrink is not as, how should I say, a taboo as perhaps it is in India or some parts of Asia. But today, even in India or Asia, you find there is a lot more openness around confronting issues of mental health and depression and, seeking help. So I believe that coaching needs to adapt itself to this paradigm of open society, transparency, and comfort with seeking help and sharing about concerns and anxieties or issues.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Clearly, experimentation and group coaching is what you're saying. So Dr. Misra, I'll request you for closing comments, but before that, I'm sure everybody has made their own notes of their learnings. I've made mine, and I just wanted to kind of share some of those. Speed coaching, sprint coaching, circle of coaching was one kind of area that you talked about. Risk stimulus in coaching and in making the coachee take certain risks was the second area. Experimentation being core to transformation is a third part you talked about. You also talked about your own journey of what has happened earlier and now what you're going through right now. And you talked about self-awareness, looking at what's the purpose, how you are making a difference, repurposing life and repurposing mindset. Some of those things you talked about in your own journey. And then when we did that word cloud, what people wrote a lot about the changes required in the leaders in the coming decade was about humility, adaptability, listening, agility, and some interesting thoughts there. So those were my takeaways. I'm sure every individual on the call have their takeaways. So last comments, Dr. Misra, from you. And especially
sorry, go on, please. Yeah.
Especially if you can leave 3 messages for people on the call, coaches on the call, as to how can they transform themselves.
Well, I don't think I am a great believer in prescriptions, but all I would encourage is and request everybody that we need to question and ask more questions around every tool, technology, process of coaching, and revisit the paradigms and training that we received in coaching. Continuously ask ourselves that the way coaching is thought about, coaching is practiced, is it going to remain relevant in that form, or there are new emerging paradigms that need to be factored into to adapt coaching as a profession? And last and most important thing is that I believe that that menu approach that we talked about, that people's expectation out of coaching, the time frame and process will continue to evolve and undergo a change, and we need to be prepared to cater to that and meet that, and rather than sit in the comfort of our own understanding of how we want to practice coaching. How we want to practice coaching, maybe our own personal preference and value, but that may not be what the client is necessarily looking for. So I think we need to be more client-centric, and thereby being willing to learn through dialogue of this platform of Coacharia or any other process or platform to reflect about it and reorient ourselves to help other people transform, and in doing so, they being able to contribute to life and society will be very critical. Thank you very much, Kocharya, for inviting me. Thank you all participants who joined in. I appreciate your joining in and all the questions you asked. Your questions pushed me to think some more. It's been a long day for me. I'm sure it has been for you as well. Thank you very much, Kanika and Sajay, again for helping me through this. And Nessa, it was wonderful for you to set it up for us. And thank you for your kindness.
Yes, of course, Doctor. It was absolutely a phenomenal session. Thank you so much for your insights, Anjay and Kanika. It was absolutely a pleasure to be here. And thank you to all of our audience members. We had, I think, participation from just about every time zone, which is super exciting. Continue the conversation with us on our LinkedIn platform, Awake, Aware, Arise. We have a wonderful community there, a lot of really great conversation. So again, stop in, drop your insights, drop your questions. We would love to have you. And then stay in tune. We have more sessions to come, of course. I think in closing, transformation is, it's beautiful. It's sometimes painful. It's all a part of the journey. And it's definitely something that, that I've embraced. And I think that with some of the insights that you shared here, Doctor, I think with the unique times that we have in 2020, as leaders evolving and evolving our ability to influence others, I think it's a really important topic to keep front of mind. Especially as you said, as leaders become more and more siloed and a little lonely on top, I think that it's important that you just stay grounded in the basics of leadership and incorporating some of these coaching practices and transformational practices into our day-to-day will only help us grow and be better. So thank you. Sincerely, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you everybody for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, wonderful afternoon, and a wonderful evening.
You too.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.